Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is Tales from the Crypt Presents Bordello of Blood. Now, Bordello of Blood is the second film in a trilogy of spin-off movies of the TV series Tales from the Crypt. The first movie in the trilogy, of course, was the movie Demon Knight, which I just recently did a review on. Now, I have Bordello of Blood on the same DVD as I have Demon Knight. Now, I'm going to be honest, I actually used to really hate this movie. Like, if you were to ask me about this movie, I would have outright told you that it sucks, but to be honest, I recently rewatched this movie, and rewatching it, I liked it a lot better than I ever remembered liking it. Like, I actually really kind of dig this movie. I actually think this is a legitimately pretty funny movie, actually. So, the plot of Bordello of Blood is, in the beginning of the movie, you have this brother and sister. The sister is kind of like the guardian of the brother, even though the brother really doesn't look that young. The brother is actually played by Corey Feldman, and the brother is kind of like this metalhead, and he's kind of like a rebel, but his sister is basically an uptight Christian, and they get into a fight, and he goes out to the bar with his friends, and what happens is they meet this weird-ass guy at the bar who tells them about this whorehouse that they should go to, and they go there, and it turns out the whorehouse is located under a funeral home, and it turns out that all the women there are actually vampires, and so what ends up happening is Corey Feldman's character ends up getting turned into a vampire, but his sister, of course, doesn't know what happened to him, so she ends up hiring this sleazy private eye detective played by Dennis Miller to go looking for her brother, and eventually Dennis Miller's character finds out what's actually going on, and that's the basic plot line of Bordello of Blood. But in the movie, eventually this woman, at first she doesn't believe him that vampires are involved with all this, but when she does find out, she of course tries to help him stop these vampires, and once again, that's the plot line of Bordello of Blood. So, yeah, I honestly actually kind of recommend Bordello of Blood. Once again, I used to really hate this movie, but I've grown to actually kind of like this movie. This is actually a legitimately pretty funny horror comedy. Now, Demon Knight was a horror comedy as well, but in the case of that movie, Demon Knight was very much more of a horror film than a comedy. In the case of this movie, though, it's definitely more comedy than horror. Like, there are definitely horror elements in it, but it's actually a much funnier movie than Demon Knight. I still personally think Demon Knight is a better movie, but there's a lot more humor in this movie, though. But the humor actually does legitimately work in this movie. And Dennis Miller, his character in this movie is such a sleazebag, yet you actually like this character. He's legitimately a really likable character, despite the fact that he is, once again, a complete sleazebag. Now, the film also stars Chris Sarandon, who was also in movies like Fright Night and Child's Play and The Princess Bride, and he also played the voice of Jack Skellington in The Nightmare Before Christmas, and Chris Sarandon is also really good in this movie. Like, he plays a complete asshole in this movie, and his character is more or less the villain of this movie, because really all these vampires in the movie are pretty much his fault, because it turns out that he's a preacher in the movie. He's like a charismatic preacher who's on television, and it turns out that he knows about the vampires, and the whole reason he's keeping these vampires is because he wants them to kill people who would go to a whorehouse. He basically wants to wants them to kill people who he views as sinners, so he really is a bad guy, yet he does kind of redeem himself at the end where he realizes what he did was wrong and he actually starts to help out Dennis Miller's character by trying to stop the vampires and all that. The movie also has Phil Fondacaro in it, who was also in movies like Troll and Ghoulies 2, and after this movie he would be in movies like Land of the Dead. He's an actor who I really, really like, and he was also in 1 or 2 episodes of the TV show Tales from the Crypt as well. The movie also has a pretty funny cameo appearance from Whoopi Goldberg. I also really liked the opening of this movie with the Crypt Keeper. Basically, in the beginning of the movie, before the actual movie starts, you have a little prologue with the Crypt Keeper, and he's at a bar with the Mummy, and the Mummy is actually played by William Sadler, who was also in Demon Knight, where he played the character Frank Breaker. But basically, the Mummy is going off about stuff, and the Crypt Keeper is not even remotely interested in what the Mummy has to say, and he's like saying shit like, oh, I'll give my left nut not to be here right now, and it's actually really, really funny. And one thing that I do want to point out is this movie does have a lot of similarities with the Robert Rodriguez movie From Dusk Till Dawn. Like, both this and From Dusk Till Dawn have scenes in it where the main characters use water guns filled with holy water to kill the vampires. And From Dusk Till Dawn did come out before this movie, so I wouldn't be surprised if they drew some inspiration from Dusk Till Dawn. So, yeah, overall, I definitely recommend Bordello of Blood. I used to hate the movie, but it's actually a pretty fun horror comedy, and I would recommend it.